Lane Kiffin has instilled the best of Nick Saban in this Ole Miss football team, and it showed in Saturday night's 40-6 win over Wake Forest. I'll tell you what I'm talking about next.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I am your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast, we're talking about the Rebels' dominant 40-6 win over Wake Forest. And to be honest, the game confirmed a lot of what I've been saying about this Ole Miss team for months. But let's be real. This was a C-minus performance. But it still resulted in a 34-point win on the road against a Power 4 team. Earlier Rebel teams would have lost playing like this, but not this one. The players were frustrated and even upset about how poorly they thought they played, which speaks volumes about their expectations and mindset and can probably give Ole Miss fans like a little bit of hope even more moving forward. That reaction alone has me thinking this team might have a real claim as the best team in all of college football so far. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. And don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC, or even Zach Blackerby at Locked On Auburn provides more perspectives on college football, the SEC, and heck, even Ole Miss. So check it out. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Go to the 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive $20 off your order. You know, Lane Kiffin gets a lot of credit for his time with Nick Saban, and some of it he doesn't necessarily deserve. He is somebody that has a lot of what he does. It comes from the Pete Carroll stuff from the early 2000s when he was at USC with Norm Chow and Steve Sarkisian and all of those guys. A lot of what his coaching makeup is comes from there. But I am noticing something that is happening from his time with Nick Saban that he has put and instilled in this team that should give Ole Miss fans a ton of hope. And that is, after a 40-6 win, to where Ole Miss did not play particularly well. They were sloppy as heck, over 10 penalties, over 100 yards in penalties, 2 turnovers on the day, a missed PAT. A lot went wrong. Past Ole Miss teams would have figured out a way to lose that game. We all know that that is the case. We've all seen that football game. But this Ole Miss team didn't. And the talent that they had was able to stretch it out to a win over a Power 4 team on the road over by 34 points, easily covering every spread known to man. And honestly, it wasn't that competitive. The problem that Ole Miss fans had with it was how it looked at times, when Ole Miss just kind of got sloppy in the middle of the game. But Ole Miss winning that game, it was important. It was a big step. It was their first road test of the entire season. And I talked last week that road tests are how the mettle of a team is made over the course of the season. They were able to get that win. They were able to pull together. Jaxson Dart did some tough stuff that he did exactly like when they were down at Tulane a year ago, but that's not the things that I'm focused on right now. Ole Miss is visibly upset with their performance in a 40-6 win on the road at Wake Forest. Visibly. To the point where they will openly tell you, we did not play well. We did not do what needed to be done. We did not handle and play at our standard in this game against Wake Forest. In other words, anything other than 66-3 is probably not acceptable because we left points on the field, and it is our goal not to leave points on the field as SEC play is getting closer. Lane Kiffin has instilled in his team the best part of what Nick Saban used to do at Alabama. We always, like I said, give Kiffin credit for his Pete Carroll time. This is his Nick Saban that is coming out to the point where they are so process-oriented in how they are supposed to play that when they do not meet their own standard that they have set, that is an affront to them. They are upset with themselves. They are going to go back and work. Lane Kiffin gets to go in on Monday or Sunday, whenever they watch the film of the game, and yell at his team. And there's going to be a ton to yell about. From the slow mesh that Wake Forest had some success in the third quarter, kind of taking advantage of the linebackers, to the penalties, to the forcing the pass by Jaxson Dart. Jaxson Dart threw an interception in this game, to a bad snap that took points directly off the board because Ole Miss at that point was going up and down the field on Wake Forest. So in summation, what we're saying is, in a game where Ole Miss had about 650 yards of offense, about 33 first downs, 280 yards rushing, they get mad. They get to look at this like, hey, Wake Forest in this game was a field goal away from tying at the end. Like I said, we've all seen that game to where Wake Forest was in the game and they had no business being there. But they weren't there. And Ole Miss did some things really well. And Ole Miss has a couple of metrics that's attached to them that is just downright dominant and is probably the lead bullet points in their case for being the most dominant team in all of college football this season. Now, because Ole Miss is on the side of the helmet, you're not going to get that credit. They're not going to give it to you. Now, I think somebody from the Baton Rouge Advocate in today's AP poll or yesterday's AP poll actually rated Ole Miss as number 2 in the entire country, with Ohio State being the head. So in his eyes, Ole Miss is the best team in the whole Southeastern Conference. And I honestly, Ole Miss has an argument to be the best team in the entire country. And the part of that makes me believe that is how they're reacting to this Wake Forest game. Beating Wake Forest 40-6 is not good enough. That's not what they did not perform to the standard they are setting for themselves. The score is irrelevant. It is all about how you play. You don't do this. You don't do that. You don't do this. And any of the stuff that it shows up, that's like a huge red mark on your test. We talked about last week. I figured Ole Miss was going to win this game 41-10. That was my predicted score. The score is 40-6. And the difference is I thought that Wake Forest was going to be able to get into the end zone. Wake Forest threw for nearly 500 yards a week ago against Virginia, had over 30 points in the game. They did a lot of things really well. Their wide receivers are pretty good. Their quarterback is good. And they do this quirky slow mesh thing that can kind of function like a service academy offense. So I figured that Wake Forest was going to figure out a way to get into the end zone once. What I did not account for was they were completely not going to be able to run the football. Ole Miss inside the red zone, we're going to talk about that in just a second, is absolutely elite in college football. There's not many places you would rather be. I think there's 3 teams in all of college football that has not given up a touchdown this season, and that's Ole Miss, Georgia, and Ohio State. And if you were to be told that those are the 3 most dominant teams in all of college football, it would make a ton of sense. It's the reason I think right now, because of this reaction to Wake Forest and the way people are looking at it and the dominant metrics that we're going to talk about in the next segment, Ole Miss might be the best football team in all of college football right now. Now, I'm not saying they're going to end up that way. There's still a lot of stuff that there's a lot of football that's left to be played. But right now, as of middle of September, this might be the best football team in all of college football. And there's going to be a lot of questions that start to get answered and asked from every team inside the Southeastern Conference. So we'll see exactly how that goes. This week, Ole Miss comes in at number 5 in the AP poll and number 5 in the coaches poll after a 46 win over Wake Forest. Honestly, after the USF game, they should have jumped Alabama. And Texas moved up in the AP poll to number 1. In the coaches poll, it's still Georgia. Ohio State's still up there as well. Texas is minus Quinn Ewers at the moment. Arch Manning's getting some run at quarterback for them. When we come back, we're going to tell you the defensive fact of what we learned in that Wake Forest game and what is giving us hope. I wanted to tell everybody the best part of what Nick Saban did at Alabama, Lane Kiffin is doing at Ole Miss, to where the players take ownership of the process and the fact that they can be visibly upset in a dominating performance, that is an unbelievably good sign. That is an unbelievably good sign for what Ole Miss can be. And Ole Miss has Georgia Southern. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the week. We have Dave Schultz from Locked On Sunbelt that's going to come on and talk about that. Georgia Southern has defensive problems coming in this game. They're giving up about 500 yards per game, and they haven't played a Power 5 opponent to this point. So offensively, they've won some games, and their record looks pretty good, but they do have some defensive problems at the moment. Coming up, we've talked about all of the intangibles, but there are also some dominant strengths that Ole Miss can hang their hats on right now. Find out what's powering the Rebels next. Grab a 5-hour energy shot to stay alert and watch all of your favorite games. Or if you stayed up late watching that overtime game the night before, take a 5-hour energy shot the next morning so you can start your day. 5-hour energy is the brand hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years that give them energized, alert feelings that they need to get through a busy, hectic day. You always know where to find 5-hour energy shots. It's right at the cash register at nearly every convenience, drug, and grocery store nationwide. Stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5-hour energy shots. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5, hourenergy.com, and get some 5-hour energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order, and it can't be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders as well. So go to 5hourenergy.com today. College football is back, and it's not too late to catch up before this next weekend's action. We're about to go into week 4, by the way. The SEC, the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12, they all have squad shows to where they preview all the games over the course of the week. You can get all of the action from Locked On stable of college football experts by subscribing to the Locked On College Football Podcast. Who has a chance to make the playoff? What teams will cause chaos in their new conference? Everything you need to know all in one place. So be sure to follow and subscribe to the Locked On College Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Really interesting stuff. And what we learned most of all in this Wake Forest football game, Ole Miss won 40-6, is Ole Miss has now outscored their 3 opponents this season at a clip of 168-9. Yes, you heard that correctly. Ole Miss is averaging winning their first 3 games 56-3. They have not been competitive. None of them. None of them have been competitive. And Ole Miss has not given up a touchdown in the first 3 games for the first time since 1961. That is the cool thing. Anytime the era of the early 1960s and late 1950s come up, that is a good thing for Ole Miss football. And also, this team is absolutely elite in the red zone right now. And with this offense, completely look out for what they're doing. It's nuts. And we're going to start with that point of them being really good in the red zone. Right now, they've allowed 6 trips into the red zone. That's inside the 25-yard line. Going into the end zone, they have not given up a touchdown or point this season in 6 trips. They have given up 2 field goals in 6 trips. And there's 4 possessions that came away completely empty this season between Furman, Middle Tennessee, and Wake Forest. Ole Miss is making plays in the red zone. They have not given up a touchdown, like I said, period. Big play, explosive play, red zone, it doesn't matter in 3 games. This for the first time since 1961 that has happened. For, just so everybody knows, 1962 was the national championship season. So since Ole Miss has won a national championship since that feat has happened. And the era between like 1957 and 1963, everybody knows that is considered the glory days of Ole Miss football. And they were built on solid defense. They played a lot of defense back then. They just did. But the thing that I'm really focused on, and I just can't get it out of my head, is that 168-9. That's a 56-3 average score in the first 3 games. And with Georgia Southern coming up, honestly, there's a chance that it could happen again. It's not a guarantee that Georgia Southern is going to get the ball in the end zone. Somebody has to. Somebody's going to score on Ole Miss this year, and it's going to happen probably sooner rather than later. But they haven't to this point. And they've had opportunities to do it. Like I said, 6 trips into the red zone, not getting into the end zone. It doesn't matter who you play because there are teams that can make touchdowns happen and scheme them up from time to time at all levels. I think Idaho against Oregon scored 2 or 3 touchdowns in that game. That was an FCS versus a top 5 FBS team. So you can scheme open touchdowns. It's still a big deal that nobody has scored that touchdown yet. And like I said, Georgia Southern might be able to do it. They might. Georgia Southern's averaging about 350 yards per game. Not the greatest in the world. They're averaging giving up 500 yards per game. Not the greatest in the world, but somehow they're 2-1. They've beaten Nevada Reno. They've beaten Savannah State, I believe. They lost to Boise State, but gave them a game. They have, like I said, they have not played a Power 4 opponent. So this will be interesting for them. But 168-9 and keeping that streak going as long as possible, that looks really good. That is something you can recruit off of. We've gotten to the point where Ole Miss's defense is doing things that Nick Saban's Alabama defense did and Kirby's Georgia defense did. Those type things are imperative for Ole Miss this year because we talk about Ole Miss being elite in the red zone. Why is that important for Ole Miss to be elite in the red zone? I said over the 8 months previous this year, when I knew Ole Miss was going to have a really good defense, I told people the most important thing for Ole Miss over the course of this season is to be really good in the red zone to force field goals and to have explosive plays to put teams in long yardage. Make it to where they can't have long sustained drives against you that can end in a touchdown. If that can happen with how good your offense has a chance to be, you have a chance to win a ton of football games this year, like 12. Because if you look at the FPI, I kid you not on this, the ESPN FPI has Ole Miss now like a 56% probability favorite over Georgia this season. That's every game this season Ole Miss is the probability favorite in. And it makes sense. I mean, it's fine. Now, do I believe that's the case? I don't know. I mean, Georgia has games. They messed up against Missouri in 2022, ended up winning the national championship in 2023. They wwere sluggish against Auburn. They still had potentially the best team in all of college football. And then this year they were sluggish at Kentucky. This happens once a year. This gives Kirby Smart the ability to go in and yell at his team in a game that they won. So I don't know if I believe that probability, but if you want to look at stats for and against and all of the stuff that the metrics that the ESPN FPI goes off of, it is what it is. You look at the stats from this season, Jaxson Dart currently is at 73 of 88. That's about an 83% completion percentage through 3 games, by the way. 1,172 yards, 8 touchdowns. He did force his 1 interception of the season against Wake Forest. Probably a good thing. He's a gunslinger. He tries to make plays. And with this defense, he honestly can, if we're just going to be real. Henry Parrish is now up to 354 yards on 45 carries. He's averaging about 8 yards per clip. He has 6 touchdowns. He's doing a fine job. Ole Miss is doing great running the football this year, especially in between the tackles. If you look on PFF, they're averaging nearly 8 yards per carry running the ball up the middle in between the guards. If you're hitting the A-gaps, you're averaging about 8 yards per carry, and that's pretty big time. And Matt Jones, by the way, congratulations to Matt Jones. He averaged about 7.5 yards per carry against a Power 4 opponent on the road. That's an important feat for him as well. And Trey Harris is going to be the dude this year. He already has 28 catches, 436 yards, and 2 touchdowns. At this point, he is going to win the Blitnikoff Award. We have a point with Jaxson Dart can win the Heisman. He is going to win the Blintnikoff as pending health. He's going to have numbers that are going to be absolutely ridiculous. He's averaging nearly 10 catches per game, about 150 yards per game. He's not getting a lot of touchdowns, but he's going to end up somewhere in the neighborhood of 90 to 110 catches for about 1,800 yards this season if this keeps up. Just add this or multiply this times 4, and he's about 1,800 yards in the course of the season. It's absolutely nuts. He's a terrific, terrific football player, but we'll see exactly how that goes. Offensively, all of the weapons are there, and it's important for this defense to make it to where the offense can score points and develop that separation, because they don't give up points as quickly and easily as the offense can score points. That is the whole strategy behind this football team. Coming up next on Locked On Ole Miss Football, our Locked On Ole Miss podcast, let's talk Week 4 SEC betting lines powered by FanDuel. Can the Rebels cover their spread? Find out the top matchups, the expert insights, and betting tips you won't want to miss. You heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. We have something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube or YouTube TV. Then with your YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. You can get Ole Miss at -30 against Georgia Southern this weekend, or Ole Miss in their national championship odd at +1,200 has gone down a little bit. Or Jaxson Dart's Heisman odds are now at +600, which is like 6-1 odds. Whatever your flavor is, you can get it today. So just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sports book. So the Week 4 betting lines are out, and honestly, they're pretty interesting with what's going on. This is kind of a smaller slate than normal. I think there's 8 games that we're watching this week because the bye weeks are starting for teams. Florida is a 6.5-point favorite on the road at Mississippi State. And if you know what is going on at Florida right now, this line is absolutely ridiculous. Florida being a 6.5-point favorite over air freaks me out with what's going on in Gainesville right now. But Mississippi State got absolutely boat raced by Toledo. The Rockets took it to them. So this is a stay away from it game, I think, honestly. But Florida's 6.5 points is going to be quite interesting. It's in Davis Wade Stadium, but the fan base is just getting ready to completely jump off of the ship. It's almost an abandoned ship type time. Ohio is at Kentucky. Kentucky's a 15-point favorite. Kentucky has lost 2 games in a row to where they were offensively challenged, shall we say. They were not good against South Carolina. They were not good against Georgia. They were able to get some field goals and scored 12 points, but they were not able to get it into the end zone, which eventually, if they could have scored one, they would have beaten Georgia on Saturday night. Vanderbilt is at Missouri. Missouri is a 21.5-point favorite. Vanderbilt completely laid an egg at Georgia State over the weekend. It was a situation that you can't do that. They scored a touchdown to go ahead. Pavia did what he was supposed to do. After the slow start, the defense, Clark Lee's unit, was the one that gave it up. Missouri was able to fight off a pesky BC squad to get the win over the day with Bill O'Brien and all of that. Missouri saved their point. I think they're 6th or 7th in the AP poll. Tennessee may have jumped them, actually. Arkansas is at Auburn. Auburn is a 4.5-point favorite as it sits right now. This is a line that was moving fairly early on. Taylor Green at Arkansas, he has done a good job as far as an offensive weapon. Auburn is weird. I don't know if the right team's favored in this game. They gave up points against New Mexico, and they didn't score a whole bunch of points against New Mexico when other teams have been doing that exact thing. So I don't know exactly where they sit at the moment. LSU or UCLA is at LSU. LSU is a 23.5-point favorite. This is a game. This is almost, I think this is free money. UCLA got boat raced by Indiana over the weekend. And Indiana's a well-coached team. They've got James Madison's Kurt Cignetti as their coach now. They're going to win football games. They're going to be fine. But UCLA got absolutely trounced on their home field against Indiana. And think about that for a second. LSU was able to get the last-minute win. LSU got saved by Lenore Sellers getting injured and them having to go in the second half against Robbie Ashford. LSU was able to get saved by that, but I do not think that LSU is going to have that much trouble with UCLA. Tennessee is a 7.5-point favorite over Oklahoma in Norman. This is the college game day game. Tennessee is having a similar streak right now to Ole Miss. I think their spread is like 178 points. It's absolutely nuts how explosive they've been. Nico Iamaleava, a terrific quarterback, and is somebody that by the time he is a junior, it's probably Heisman time for Nico. It's probably national championship time for Tennessee. Nico's that good of a quarterback as he's shown early. Akron is at South Carolina. South Carolina is a 27-point favorite. If Sellers can't go, I don't know if South Carolina is going to score 27 points in this game. Rocket Sanders is going to do his thing, but we'll see exactly how that looks between Akron and South Carolina over the weekend. Bowling Green is at Texas A&M. A&M is a 22-point favorite. A&M kind of got right against Florida over the weekend. Georgia Southern's at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a 30-point favorite. That line feels low, especially seeing online that Georgia Southern has given up about 500 yards a game, and they've played Boise State, Nevada, and Savannah State. Those have been the three games, and they're averaging about 500 yards a game. I look for Henry Parrish to go off on this one, and Ole Miss is probably going to do their thing where they come out throwing the football fairly early on when the defense is trying to adjust to the tempo. And ULM is at Texas. Texas is a 42-point favorite. It's going to be the General Booty versus Arch Manning game likely, and we'll see exactly how that goes. Texas should win this game fairly easy. Louisiana Monroe is probably the lowest budget school in all of FBS. Honestly, they probably belong in FCS if we're going to be real about it. So we'll see exactly how that goes. You want to look at this? Jaxson Dart is 6-1, plus 600 to win the Heisman Trophy in the latest lines. That is a tie for second. The leader in the clubhouse right now is Cam Ward. And Ole Miss is a plus 1,200 team to win the national championship. That is sixth. That is 12-1. That's probably a decent value bet for people right now as well. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first and go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves in offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the number one Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the world to us. Locked On, thank you for making it your first listen of the day. Now go check out Locked On College Football Podcast. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description down below, so you don't even need to search for it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And exciting news, you can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider, the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. Our texting program sends you notifications on everything relevant without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial and experience the future of college sports coverage. We're adding new perks as we grow, so don't miss out. The link is down in the description as well. For those of you watching on YouTube, we're going to send you to Locked On College Sports right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.